Well, first off, I apologize to my previous speakers because I did give them a lot of topics, but my goal was to give you guys as much information as I could. Secondly, is so I could have more fun with my talk because they covered all the other stuff. But you know, these guys make a living challenging farmers, but when I challenge them, they all whine. So you know how that goes. I do want to, you know, the speakers did a great job. Dr. Reed, maintenance, you're absolutely right. Justine, manual backflushing, you're absolutely right. Brandon, people, you're absolutely right. So let's fly through this. I think you guys got a lot of good practical information. For those of you, a lot of you in the room I work with, I am the udder doctor, so if it doesn't move, I'm not interested. The Japanese come up with this logo, and I've kind of incorporated them into mine. I keep waiting for Mike to wear this shirt, but so far he hasn't. So I work on milk quality all over with large herds, small herds. This is my 4th time speaking here, and there are some of the best dairies in the United States right in this room. I'm so proud because I used to hear, you don't understand, Dr. Johnson. We cannot get under 300,000 in the Southeast. And it was, well, we can never get under 200,000. Well, we'll never, ever, ever get under 150. Now I get a call from one of my farmers that says, God, we're at 110. What do we got to do? And I said, wait a minute. You told me you would be happy and never ask for another thing if you were under 150. So you guys have really done well. Just get it all the way. It was not good for us. And you know, when you think about our record when we were ahead by 10 or more points, 306 wins, 1 losses, except this year, it didn't work out that way. And I am a stockholder and a fan, and it was pretty disappointing that night we lost when we were leading 21-3. Nobody dared talk to me and my family. I was not happy, but there's always next year. I thought this was cute. It says, I hate leftovers, quit complaining, chew your cud. So I'm such an old dinosaur in the industry, but the story has basically stayed the same. Last night I made a mistake. I brought my wife and my granddaughter to introduce her to a lot of my clients here. And they all said the same thing. Boy, your husband has done nothing but pissed us off for all these years. So my granddaughter said, holy crap. And I said, I'll put it this way. When I die, and my dream is to drop dead in a parlor, and one farmer says, well, how are we going to get you out of there? I said, with a log chain and a skid steer. How the hell do you think you're going to get me out of there? And I said, when we have my funeral, you'll hear the same thing. Your husband really pissed me off, but he had our backs. And that's what you all know me. That's what we're all about. Over 25 years ago, you guys said you couldn't do it. And now there's 12 dairies in this room. Actually, for the last 6 months, your average cell count has been 82,000, ranged from 52 to 92, and that's over 35,000 cows. So when you guys say you can't, yeah, you can. Dairies must make decisions based on facts, not assumptions. Everybody's looking for the easy way, and a lot of you guys that I work with say if we just listened to you sooner, we'd have been there sooner, but we kept looking for maybe an easier way, and so many mistakes have been made by too many dairies. I have this award called the 100-100 Award, which means if you can average for a month over 100 pounds of milk and under 100,000 cell count, you get this award. And in 15 years, over 40 dairies have achieved this, and 75% of those have been in the last 5 years. 8 dairies in this room have achieved this award. So 100-100 Club all over the United States. We do it with sand, recycled sand, sawdust mattresses, and manure solids. I now have manure solid dairies under 100,000. I didn't think that was possible. But if we do things right, it is. And I think that's the key message I can give everybody here, doing the little things right all the time. It's not, what can I buy, what can I change? It's, what do I need to do every milking? And like Brandon said, it's the people. You know, Mustafa and Amadeo in here, it's because of them we're so successful. They get their people that do it and believe in it. And I think that's what we have to really work on. We have to understand the mastitis triangle If you really want to produce quality milk, it's that relationship of the cow and her environment, the milking routine, and the milking equipment. One of those can't solve your problem. I've seen dairymen spend $400,000 on a piece of milking equipment that's going to solve all their problems. Well, they spent the money, but their problems are not better. Well, this teat dip's going to solve all my problems. I tell every dairyman, if there was one teat dip, one liner that would solve your problem, you'd already be on it. So again, it's not that simple. What are the key issues to getting to 100,000 and staying there? Clean cows, number one. Correct milking routine, correct pre and post dip, proper milking equipment settings, how we handle our bedding, and how well do we take care of our stalls. And quality is determined at the farm. It doesn't matter what your neighbor does. What do you do on your farm? That's what matters. Like you've seen this slide every time I talk, is the cell count on your dairy is exactly what you've decided it should be. I've never been to a dairy, Dr. Reed, you guys have never been to a dairy with a 400,000 cell count. Went, wow, why is that? So again, you have to make that decision. It reflects your management decisions, and it reflects your attitude. You can do better if that's what you choose to do. Every farm in this room is capable of being under 150. Be honest, you can be under 100, I think, without too much. Size doesn't matter, attitude does. Where's the future going to be? Think of how much we changed the last 10 years, the last 5 years. And by the way, Brandon, you used the word depends. People my age think of it a whole different way than everybody else. I actually went for my annual physical the other day, and the doctor says, well, do you poop every day? I go, yeah, every day at 6 o'clock. He said, well, that's good. I said, not when you get up at 7. So, 30,000 pound dairies are common now. Mike, you and I both remember when the first dairy hit 20. Some dairies are pushing 40. Is a 50,000 pound herd in our future? I think so. We don't know where it's going to end. We talk about 7 pounds of total solids. Mike's going to talk about 8. We got now dairies over 9. Now in Wisconsin, it's a bad thing right now. We got 3 milk plants that will not pay above 4.2, even if you're a Jersey herd. And that's getting to be painful. I said, we worked so hard to get all these things changed, and all of a sudden they say, no, we don't want that anymore. And that's not something you can just turn off tomorrow. The top herd I work with, 13,600 cows going to far, 94 pounds of milk a day, 69,000 cell count, less than 0.5% being treated. So it can be done. It starts with the environment. If I was going to change one thing on your dairy, it's going to be your environment. Clean cows. We can solve so many problems with clean cows. It's not the milking equipment, it's not the milking routine, it's clean cows. It really is. Most dairies do not like to admit their cows are dirty. It's the number one challenge to getting dairies to where they need to go. But dairymen hate it when you walk in and say, man, your cows are dirty. It's like you're just insulting them. But if that's the fact, that's the fact. The most common problem with dirty cows are strep species, especially when you see dirty cows, you see a lot of strep species clinicals. And something I coined many, many years ago, strep species equals feces. It's really that simple. You expose them to manure, you're going to have more mastitis. Listen to the cow. She rarely lies. When I go to a dairy, I look at the records, I look at the cows, and I tell the farmer what I saw, and they said, where the hell did you get that? From your records. So pay attention. Do dirty legs really matter? There's a big difference between those dairies. If you really want to see how dirty your cows are, go in the parlor. That's where you can see them the best. Well, does a dirty foot matter? Where's that foot when a cow lays down? Right by the teats. Exposure. It makes a difference. One of the biggest things I believe in, and most of the guys I work with here believe in, is mechanically grooming. At least once a day, grooming your stalls makes a huge difference. I have dairies now that are doing it 3 times a day because they see that much different. And if you got mattress herds, throw away the scraper and go to brushes. Mechanical grooming, some dairies believe it's worth 1 to 3 pounds more milk because the cows are more comfortable. So again, I think grooming is something we can't live without. I don't care how you do it, whether you level or you dig, the key is do it every day. If you got mattresses or mats, these brushes work very, very well. Or if you're going to do it by hand, don't use a scraper, use a stiff bristled brush. So when you use a scraper, you just leave a film of manure on the beds that grow bacteria. Proper bedding storage. Well, I've fought with a lot of people here, but we finally got it. Most people are doing this. One of your biggest enemies is wet sand going into your stalls. So most of the guys I work with, the sand that's going to go in the stall next week, cover it. And once they started doing that, it made a huge difference. I see a guy shaking his head over there that, yep, that wet sand kills us. So again, managing those things make a difference. And it doesn't cost a lot of money. Milking routine people, huge impact on how fast and complete cows milk. Not about milking more cows, or it's not just about milking more cows, but producing excellent quality milk. You can have both. Proper training is the key. It's not a one-time deal. That's why you got to have people on your dairy that believe in it and get it done. Consistency is the key. Inconsistency is the problem. I think Dr. Reed, you might have said it once, that I'd rather see somebody doing things a little bit wrong consistently than trying to do it right inconsistently. So again, it matters. What do I recommend? You know, some people like to dry wipe and pre-dip, then strip and dry, and then attach in a line. I think it'll give you the highest flow rates. But here's the really key. The more physical time you spend on that teat, the faster she'll let her milk down, the shorter her duration will be. The problem is we're trying to spin these rotaries so fast we can't do that. But you know, it's not uncommon now for dairies averaging over 100 pounds of milk to be under 4 minutes. I got one dairy almost at 3 minutes, 3.2 minutes, and they're 105 pounds of milk. Think about that. My experience, no dairy can justify not stripping. Every farm that stops stripping that I work with sees an increase in cell count and an increase in duration. I think stripping is very, very important. Stripping teats must start, that's what starts the letdown clock, and I think every farmer benefits from stripping. The lowest cell count with the most cows milk per minute, definitely strip teats. But this is the key one. If you're going to only do one thing right, in my opinion, it's how well you dry the teats. I think it's the biggest reason for a lower cell count and less clinical mastitis. Time spent here gives you the best return, in my opinion. I have many big rotaries now that have added a second person just to dry. Another one told me they did too. And what are they all seeing? Higher flow rates and lower cell counts and less clinicals. To me, if I'm going to only focus on one spot, how well do we dry that teat? The big buzzword in the dairy industry right now is eliminating people. How many people can I eliminate with this new technology? The problem is most people spend all that money and don't eliminate any people. But can you manage this new technology? Sure, I put a robot pre-dipper in, I put a robot post-dipper in. How well are they working? Wouldn't that be the most important thing to try and figure out? Are we covering the teats? Are we not covering the teats? Proper drying yields the lowest clinicals, highest milk speed. So my recommendation, and you go to the dairies I work with parallels, you wipe all 4 teats, flip the towel over, wipe all 4 teats again. And that's where they focus. They focus on a good job drying. With the rotaries turning fast, we found out one guy dries with a towel, next guy dries with a towel. And that double drying has just made the biggest difference. And what do we get? Faster milking, more milk production, and better milk quality. And Dave showed some of these slides. Letdown can be really, really good. It can be really, really bad. We can get bimodals. We can get a lot of things. We can get over milking. These are the things you need to pay attention to. What do I need to adjust? God, when you and I started doing the takeoff stuff, I mean, we were at 0.8 pounds and all those numbers, and now Dave and I have dairies at 4 pounds or higher at their takeoff settings. But what does your herd need? What's right for your herd? That's what we need to do. Poor advice is as worthless as a parachute that opens on the second bounce. And man, there's a lot of that out there. But when it sounds so good, how can you not try it, right? Instead of asking the question, what kind of guarantees do I have? Will this truly help my herd? Lag time is the newest big thing in the milking industry. From the time we strip that teat till the time the machine goes on should be 90 seconds or more. You know, we used to do 2 cow preps and 4 cow preps and then 6 cow preps, and now I got 12 cow preps. And a lot of you guys with rotaries, when I move that attacher, they're like, you can't do that, I'll never get my cow's milk. And then all of a sudden they go, wow, more of them are coming off sooner. And yep, because we put the machine on at the right time. The research, I shoot for 90 to 180. Research that's been done says up to 5 minutes has no negative impact on milk production. So again, getting that proper lag time is so important. Over 75, in my opinion, over 75% of all over milking occurs at the beginning of milking. When we put that machine on, that cow don't hit high flow right away and stay there, we got a problem. And I tell people, why don't you go into your parlor and watch? And a lot of times what you see, you put the machine on, you see that instant flow, about 15, 20 seconds later, the flow all goes away. And then another 30 seconds later, it starts up again. Just think if we can eliminate that. Think of what it'll do for the teat end. Dips. Wouldn't it be nice if there was one dip that solved all your problems? Well, there's not. You got to use a proven product. You got to need the right product for the right job, the right product for the right bedding. Pre-dip's different than post-dips in a lot of cases. And what are your results? I always tell a dairyman that's at 75,000 cell count and no clinicals, that he goes, well, I'm going to try this new dip. And I go, why? And then when he tells me it's 50 cents a gallon more, then I'm like, okay, this is not a good idea. Proper mixing. This is the biggest mistake I see with a lot of dips. They're not mixed properly. Proper storage, especially down here in the southeast with your heat. A lot of the chlorine-based dips, if they're exposed to sunlight, their efficacy goes like this. Proper age. I think when you mix some of the chlorine dioxides, there's a lifespan to those that you need to pay attention to. And when you go beyond that, you really lose your efficacy. Dip prices are going crazy right now. I know you like 1% iodine. It's a great dip, but most of my dairymen can't afford it right now. It's so expensive. Many low-price dips are available, but they're not right for your situation. Select a product based on results, not just price. Sometimes spending an extra 50 cents a gallon can make you a lot of money. Sometimes saving 50 cents a gallon can lose you a lot of money. So what's right for your dairy? 90% of my clients pre-dip with chlorine. I get yelled at by all the manufacturers, you let your guys use bathtub mixes. I said, well, it's a little better than bathtub, but you got the key to chlorine working is pH. Everybody talks about part per million. pH is the key, gives it the highest killing power. Storage is critical, sunlight is bad, and it's got to be in sealed containers. But here's a study from Don Socket, and when you look at the killing power of chlorine, if you get it in that right pH range, it's amazing. So my goal is let's get between 6.5 and 6.8. Most of the new chlorine generating machines now have an acid automatically added to get the pH right. I'm doing some work in Qatar, and they have 12,000 cows with 380 rotaries, just switching them to chlorine, drop their clinicals. They're at the lowest cell count they've ever been in their life. But they were using a cheap dip, and he says to me, well, you know, we have to buy it by the container load, and he says, we just bought it a month ago. We have a container load of this dip, and I says, good. I said, put it out on the desert, because nothing's growing there anyway, it won't hurt anything, so. But again, do they mix right? You know, when I go to a dairy and I see one side of the barrels that high and one side that low, every one of those are a 50-50 mix for the most part. And I went to one dairy and I said to the owner, I said, what do we do about this? They said, oh, don't worry about it. The milkers will catch up. They'll just use more on the other side. And I said, it doesn't work that way. All these dips that mix together have to go through a chemical reaction. So I have a big dairy that we finally said, you're not going to put it in the parlors until it's at least 12 hours old. Amazing, the clinical rate difference. And the other thing is, I don't like to see them go over 48 hours. So we try to time things so we can get the highest efficacy. Storage, big deal. Paul, what are those on the green and white one? How much do they cost a piece? How much? $20. And look how nice they do storing your and protecting your, you know, this one here is nice, but we've got a lot of that dip exposed to sunlight. Robot pre-dip and post-dip can work, but most of them don't accomplish the basics of teat coverage. Yes, they replace a person, but over 50% of dairies I work with have them turned off because they just don't do a good job. Robotic dippers, very few get good coverage. A lot of them use less dip, but unfortunately to a point of terrible teat dip coverage. And that's what everybody says, well, look at how much dip I'm saving you. I said, don't help if it's not on the teats. Many automatic systems put the dip everywhere but where you want it. Some of these walkovers, man, they got dip from the brisket all the way back to the back legs, but then I look at the teats, I go, huh, they don't have any. But you have a monitoring system in place. When I go to a dairy and see dip everywhere but on the teats, not a good thing. So pay attention. And what's your best report card every day? Your milk filter. It tells me how good of a job. Everybody looks at me when I come to their dairy and I go to the garbage cans to look at the milk filters because it tells me how many clinical cases you're missing. It shows me how clean the cows that are on this dairy here. I always go, morning sock looks good. Afternoon sock looks good, but the night sock don't look so good. Must be because the cows are dirtier at night. Or do you think it's more likely the milkers aren't doing a good job at night when nobody's watching them? I go to this dairy in California, and this is the filters I look at, and he said, he gave me the list of all the consultants that have been there. He said, we're just not getting anywhere. And the only thing that's going through my mind is I hope he doesn't ask me into dinner and give me a glass of milk, because it's pretty obvious what the problem is. What are the most important factors when it comes to equipment? What vacuum setting do you have? What pulsation setting do you have? And where are your automatic takeoffs set? I don't care about brand. And then crowd gate's pretty important too if you want to get good cow flow, having a good crowd gate. And Dr. Reed brought up a real important thing. Why do we need these 4 cow wide entrances onto these rotaries? I know a guy sitting in this room that changed his entrance and cow numbers went up significantly. Having a good entrance into your parlor is critical. Vacuum settings, I'd like you to be somewhere between 11.8 and 12.7 at peak milk flow, depending on the liner you're using. But again, most dairies I go to have too low a vacuum. Pretty hard to milk cows if your vacuum's too low, because all it does is take more time. Remember, if your milking equipment is not tested while the cows are milking, it's not been properly tested. There is not one milking machine company in the world that can set your vacuum on your gauge and say that's the right vacuum. Do you think a dairy that's milking 75 pounds a day versus a dairy milking 110, you think their vacuums are going to be the same? How about a dairy that lifts milk 3 feet from the claw to the sensor? How about dairies that go through a restrictive sensor? So if you're not going to do anything else, have your system tested while your cows are milking, and it has a huge impact, or production has a huge impact on that. Pulsation setting is all we used to always talk about, ratio and rate. I don't care about ratio and rate anymore. I want to know what your B phase, which is the milking, peak milking phase, and what your D phase is. And the problem is when you start pushing that V phase up, you better damn make sure the D phase is high enough. But I have dairies that are just made all the difference in the world. And I think looking at, and remember, when I'm talking about phases, I'm talking about during milking or under load, because I've been to dairies where all the pulsators were checked and the dealer said, yep, they're all perfect. I go out there and 80% of them are bad, because if you don't do them with teat plugs in and vacuum on, they can be off by 20, 30 milliseconds. So again, do it right. We used to pay attention only to rate and ratio. Now I only care about B and D phase. So I might lower your rate, leave your ratio the same. I might raise your rate. I'm a little more old-fashioned, even though Reed's older than I am. But I'm a little more old-fashioned is I don't like these really high-rate systems. I just think opening and closing that teat more than times a minute than you have to is not good for the cows. So I'm a little more conservative on rate, but I'm probably a little more aggressive. Takeoff settings, huge changes. The key is milking routine and milk path. For those of you guys I'm working with on new parlors, what's the number one thing I tell you? Milk path, milk path, milk path. Most dairies are at least at 2.2 pounds on their or higher. Some are now at 3.5. What's your highest, Dave? 3.9. So again, if we would have told you that 5 years ago, you would have kicked us out of your farm. But what's right for your dairy? What are your cows telling you? Are they doing this at the end of milking? Heifers, or do they have their own takeoff? Listen to your cow. So again, no reason to have a long delay setting because it's not necessary. But the other number is how much time are your cows in low flow? And remember, it could be on the front end, but low flow is really hard on teat ends. Every area is different. How do you know whether you need to make a change? One is, what's cow behavior at the end of milking? Another one is, what's the teat end health? Another one is, what's your strip yields tell you? And the key is that, think about your strip yields, is, everybody goes, yep, Doc Johnson said as long as I'm under 250 cc's, I'm good. Well, 220 came out of one teat and 10 came out of the other 3. So again, when we're talking about across the whole udder. So make sure when you do strip yield, you're paying attention to that. I think that where I'm usually at, you want to do them immediately when the machine comes off. 250 to 400 cc's, I'm fine with. Again, what's right for your dairy. Takeoff settings mainly helps improve milking efficiency and rarely a cause of high cell count. A lot of people all of a sudden thought, oh, my takeoff settings are too dry. Let's go back 20 years when they were only at 0.5 pounds. We didn't have cows all dying of mastitis. Takeoff settings are more for improving the efficiency of your parlor. What numbers do we want? There's all sorts of numbers out there. You need to figure out what's best for your dairy. I want your durations under 4 minutes. I want your average flow per minute over 7. I want peak flows over 9. Time in low flow under 20 seconds. And at least 15 pounds in the first 2 minutes. I think average flow per minute is a good number because it kind of reflects your whole milking process. How good of a routine do you have? How good is your equipment set up? It kind of tells me about the whole process, and I think we can look at that number. Turns per hour is huge. When we talk about 4 turns an hour, now we're talking 5.5, 6.5. My new goal is you should never be below 5. And when you look at that, how many pounds per hour are you getting out of a stall? It should be at least 125. We got dairies pushing 200 or higher. So again, these are the numbers you need to look at. So look at the difference from an income standpoint. If I'm turning a parlor 4 turns an hour versus 5.5, and they're getting 33 pounds of milking, and milk's 18 cents a pound, a double 12 is all, milking 3 times a day, will harvest $1,616,630 more milk income by turning their parlor that often, because labor stays the same, equipment stays the same, and actually it's one of the three most important factors for a profitability of the dairy, is how many pounds per hour do you harvest in your stalls. And even if you're a smaller dairy, I don't have a single farmer saying, no, I'm gonna get done 20 minutes earlier, I don't want that extra 20 minutes, I just like standing in my parlor. Every one of you got other things to do. So let's do the best job we can. Turns per hour, 4 turns versus 5.5. Labor costs the same, equipment's the same. It's changing attitudes. So what's your highest turns per hour? 6.9. Think about that. Remember we used to go to those meetings and that the university put on and say, 3 is good, 3.5 would be better, and every farm in here would fire me if you were only getting 3.5 turns an hour. So, and these are getting done with a full milking routine. They're not cutting corners. They're doing their job right. The 3 things affecting profitability, one of the 3 is pounds of milk harvested per stall per hour. I went to a seminar where the guy presented a paper, what are the 3 biggest things that affect profitability? And of course, everybody raised their hand, labor, and he goes, not at all. He said, your dairy needs a certain amount of labor to survive. Doesn't matter if the labor goes to $50 an hour, you're gonna have to have that many people. And people go, feed costs. And he goes, no, just think about that. If your cow needs a certain amount of energy, a certain amount of protein, and all this, no matter what the price is, you're gonna have to meet it, right, Mike? And then how many cows live in the first 60 days after calving? Those are ones that is a second one, and a third one is preg rate. So again, which ones have the biggest impact on your dairy? Parlor performance, milk clean cows, a good milking routine, proper equipment settings, pay attention to details. And whoever your managers are of your parlors, and when you go in the parlor, if they're not doing it right, you need to address it, because if you don't, you're sending a message like, oh, that's okay. Consistency, consistency, consistency. And with the right people, you got nothing to worry about. As Dr. Reed says, the model to success, whenever you lose interest in being better at something, chances are you already stopped being good at it. It hangs in my office wall. It hangs in many of my clients' office walls. And this is what it's about. Can you do better? That's what we're looking for. So the day is in, sit down and enjoy a good cigar. Nothing wrong with that. Relax with your best friend. So me and my cat, we just kind of enjoy life. But my wife's idea is totally different than mine. She said, I thought you were retired. I said, no, that's why I'm not, because I don't like doing the vacuuming. So anyway, life is good. And I tell you, I've been so blessed to be able to spend all these years, 50 years in the dairy industry, and there's nobody in the world I'd rather spend time with than dairy farmers. And as long as I can make a positive difference on a farm, I'm going to keep doing it. And yes, my bedside manner is probably not so good, but that's what you need. You need the truth. To tell you what you don't need to know makes no sense. So, but I know my clients in this room they know I have their back, and I will always do what's best for them, because I don't sell anything, it doesn't matter. So, the end of my presentation, and have a nice day, and here's my contact information. I'm like Brandon, I'm more than happy for you to email me, to text me, whatever you need to do. I'm there to help you. It's not a bother. So I think we got time for at least a couple questions, right?
Questions for Dr. Johnson? Or, since we've all got them here, any questions for any of our spotlight speakers this morning? She's coming around with the microphone to you.
What do you guys think? This is for anybody on the that spoke. What do you guys think about those variable vacuum adjustments where a high milk and cow vacuum will go up on it?
So Dr. Reed talked a lot about maintenance, which is a real story. And I look at it and I say, how in the world are we going to maintain that long-term on a dairy? That's my first thing. I think in theory, there's a lot of it that makes sense. We've tried it before. It's not, am I too close to that? Where do you want me to relocate to? I'll go this way.
You can't tell whether he's sitting or standing, so it doesn't matter. So.
Exactly. It's the same, right? So that would be my thought. I have nothing against the concept. I just struggle with, can we keep it operating, and who is going to flag when it isn't operating, and what's the risk if it isn't operating as it's designed?
Well, I have a couple of them in, and I was pretty negative on them at first, but now I got one dairy that's well over 100 pounds of milk, under 100,000 cell count, and he's going to be the first dairy I think it's going to break the 3-minute barrier. But like Brandon said, there's so many moving parts. I think in concept, if we can keep it working right, it has some real merit. But if we can't, it can really bite your butt. You gonna stay quiet, Dr. Reed, or what?
So Brandon's right. You've got all those tubes, all the connections to keep it working. There was a reason a couple of people, Norm Suring, our friend from GIA Surge days from way back, he used to call me High Vacuum Reed because I was always turning the vacuum on. So if you're using the right liner and you have consistent front end out of prep, you can run with a liner that's a stiffer liner that runs at a higher vacuum, and you can do it without some of the mechanical things that are impacting your future use of that particular product. So I'd just be a little careful. And if you're going to do it, make sure that you had some agreement on how you're going to be able to replace those things when you're running that parlor for 22 hours a day on twice-a-day milking. So again, as I said before, how is it supposed to be installed and how is it supposed to be maintained? Ask yourself those questions when you're thinking about investments.
Not in my farms. Brandon brought up a thing, they're trying to tell you that if you do this system, you don't have to prep cows anymore and all this stuff. It's baloney. It's just like a lot of other technology. Oh, you don't have to strip anymore. You don't have to do this anymore. The more corners you cut, the results will be just that. If you do it right, technology can help you in some cases, but if you do it wrong, you're in trouble.
All right. Hey, we heard a little bit about back flushing earlier. Do we see that as a need coming down the road, returning to help control some of the different contagious organisms, or is
I'm sure you're shocked that I didn't have those slides in there, but they've all heard me say it so much. But I agree. I tell you, if you're somebody I work with, you're going to have a medicated drop hose so you can manually back flush. I think a lot of the ones you buy don't put enough chemical in, or they cost you a lot of money to maintain, and they're expensive to do. But I think having manual back flush where you can handle both the outside of the unit and the inside of the unit, I think it's great.
So my experience would be that if you can't manage your pulsation system now, how are you going to manage making sure those valves don't leak and interrupt your milk path and your vacuum level drops in the claw? Because if you want to see those square kind of graphs that I showed, that Steve Stewart's talking about, you have to have that consistent vacuum. In many cases with mechanical back flush, it becomes a very high maintenance item for your dairy, and it's difficult to keep operating day in and day out. But the spot use of that, absolutely, and it does make a huge difference, especially I've seen some really large dairies that are doing some manual back flushing. It's made a huge difference in their Staph aureus control. So.
And Prototheca and
Yeah, but particularly Staph
yeah,
aureus.
yeah.
We got time for one more?
Well, again, you guys make me proud down here in the Southeast, and I'm just excited to see where your future is going to be. So thank you very much.